So the next speaker is Chip Northrup, who is on email more than I am, I think. A planning manager at Atlantic Richfield and has been an independent oil and gas investor for more than 30 years, primarily in onshore and offshore drilling rigs. He holds an MBA from the Wharton School of Business at UPenn and served on the governor of Texas's Energy Advisory Council. He now lives in Texas half the year in Cooperstown. We're delighted that he lives in Cooperstown the rest of the year. And Senator Seward, I will say, Senator Seward's been getting as much feedback from that county, from Otsego, as from Tompkins, I think. So, and I think Chip's had a lot to do with that. Chip Northrup.
Thank you, Martha. We do, my lovely wife, Nancy, and I spend half our time up in Cooperstown, up here in New York, the other half in Texas. We live on the edge of the Barnett Shale in Texas. So we basically, and we have a ranch on the other side of the Barnett Shale. So we drive back and forth through the Barnett Shale. So we're familiar with what goes on down there. When I moved up here, I joined a local advocacy group called Otsego 2000. And because of my accent, they decided that I would be the head of the gas committee. And I thought, and so I was. And to show you how conflicted I was at the time, I saw a Schlumberger truck go up Main Street in Cooperstown like 3 years ago. I was like, yeah. And then I learned differently. But it gives me a sort of an interesting perspective on this for a lot of reasons, and that is. But the main thing is how different the conditions are here, the regulatory conditions and whatnot, than they are in any of the other places that I was familiar with, New Mexico, Texas, but also Colorado, Oklahoma, California, and it puts what Ed has to do and what Barbara has to do in perspective. Because, long story short, what they have to do, and this sounds maybe a wee bit discouraging, is they'd have to bring the state of New York up at least to the regulatory threshold of, say, New Mexico. I mean, that's how low the regulatory threshold is. As Martha just mentioned, the setback for a horizontally hydrofracked well in the state of New York from a house is 100 feet. Which would be literally illegal in any state out west under any zoning ordinance out west, all of which would apply to drilling. No questions asked, no litigation for Anschutz or anybody. So with that little preamble, I am going to say that what I really want to encourage you to do is respond to the SGEIS. It's sort of your golden opportunity. You really need to take it. In some of these towns, some of these counties, it's literally the only thing they will have in terms of protections. So it's really incumbent on you to respond to it and to the regulations as well that are proposed. The SGEIS is sort of simply put, it's a mishmash or a mashup of carve-outs, noticeably to the New York City, of what really would just be considered not just junk science, but basically junk statistics. As Jannette pointed out, and voodoo for economics, and the regulations, like Martha said, 100 feet from Cuomo's house, or 100 feet. You think about why 100 feet. The only thing I can think of is that would keep a rig worker from falling off the rig into Cuomo's living room, but it's not. It's of no benefit, to that hapless rig worker. So the carve-outs, obviously, and we'll do a slide on this, but the carve-outs are based totally on political science, on vote counting. There is no science in the 1,500 pages of the regs. And of course, there's the notorious carve-out to NYC, to the primary aquifers, as opposed to the principal. The difference between a primary aquifer and principal aquifer, anybody know the difference? There is no hydrological difference. It's just a function of how many people are served by a primary versus a principal. And that was established back in 1980. So it's not science; it's political science. And if there's any poli-sci majors in the room, I'll apologize at this point. And just an example of some of the setbacks, and all this is in the websites that Bill Houston put together. There's no setback from a private lake. There's no setback from a farm pond, from a stock tank. 150 feet from a stream, 500 feet from a water well. This one really got me. I read through this, and the only rationale that I could find for 500 feet from a water well is the Fort Worth, Texas zoning ordinance, and that's 600 feet. And of course, there are no private water wells in Fort Worth, Texas. It's all on municipal. So it's sort of, it's benchmarked off of kind of an irrelevant benchmark. This is a little graph we put together. It just basically shows that the setbacks are emblematic of the protections. The setbacks of a gas drilling rig from water sources is a direct correlation, a direct function of the population served by the water. And so, if you're a cow drinking out of a pond, you don't vote in this state. Can't even vote in Texas, even a longhorn. So there's no setback. And then Cuomo's down there rented at 100 feet. That's probably, he's going to probably get that changed. And of course the one that really gets me is that and you read through this as they go out of their way to deny that drilling a gas well gasses groundwater, and of course they know in fact that it does gas groundwater. When you drill a gas well, sooner or later it will it'll mobilize methane up into groundwater. This is the Duke study, the Osborne study, that basically showed that the closer a gas drilling well rig is to a water source, the more likely methane will be at elevated levels in the water source. And sort of the threshold that it was out to 1,000 meters. So in other words, if you're within 3,300 whatever change feet of a gas well, then that groundwater is likely to be polluted with methane. Then they'll say, well, methane is, well, nobody knows what the toxicity level is. Well, you couldn't get people to drink methane at those elevations. It's not potable. This is actually a slide I got from the USGS. This basically shows, and again, this gets back to the junk science. One of the things they proposed was they said, well, we'll do a third casing. We'll prevent methane from going into groundwater, but we'll use an additional casing. In other words, a protective layer in the well. Well, the problem is that the methane goes up on the outside of the outermost casing. So, down now the standard in Pennsylvania is to go to 5 casings. I mean, why not 15? Do I hear 20? because if the methane, because the casing, the outside of the casing is cement, and cement does not adhere to shale. It doesn't. There's a lot of sedimentary layers that it doesn't adhere to. So there's no bonding between the outermost casing and the rock that it's going through. And cement, believe it or not, shrinks over time. So basically, what you've done is you perforated gas formations, including shallower formations than, say, the Marcellus or the Utica, and that enables gas to come out of those formations up into groundwater. This slide actually moves, but basically you got the idea. The molecules of gas, the methane, go up into the groundwater. And over time, in about, say, 5 years, about 25% of those wells will be leaking. And over, say, in about 8 to 10 years, about 40% of them will be leaking methane into groundwater. That's how it happens. Everybody in the industry knows this. It hasn't been a problem. It's not a problem in a semi-xeric or a xeric or semi-arid environment because there is no groundwater. Yeah, that's right. Laugh it up. We have granddaughters out at the ranch, and they never even saw rain until they were almost 2 years old. So the problem, or there is no shallow groundwater to drink. So it's not a problem in Colorado, New Mexico, West Texas. Oh, and then back to Jannette's comment about on the socioeconomic study, the E&E study. The problem, from my perspective, is that they don't even state what the reserve estimates are. They did this study that Jannette, went through, But in any study, in a loan application, in a financial statement, whatever, they would state what the reserve estimates are. In other words, our projections, financial, jobs, whatnot, are based on some reserve estimates. Well, guess what? They don't state them in the study, So they've got however many pages of it, and it's premised on nothing. So the only way you can figure out, or you to try and guess as to what the reserve estimates were that they premised this socioeconomic study on, is to go back, do the tables, and sort of back into a reserve estimate. And this is our best guesstimate. At the low end, that's they come up with 40 trillion cubic feet of gas as a reserve estimate. Well, guess what? That's half of what the USGS says the Marcellus contains in all 4 states. And at the high end, it's a multiple of how much Marcellus there is in all 4 states. So in other words, they're overstating the reserve estimates by at least a factor of 5. We knew this instantaneously when the socioeconomic, because the USGS had just published their findings about the gas estimates the week that the final September draft was supposed to come out. They said they delayed the release of it by a week. They said it was because of a hurricane or something. But the fact is, I think what they really did is I think they actually took the study back and they took the reserve estimates out of it. Because, there's no other way that they could have come up with these numbers unless they based it off of basically the hype numbers that had been current up until the time that the USGS came up with their numbers.
So read your labels on the bottom so people in the back can. The numbers that were current, the EIA is a federal agency, and it's sort of been notoriously gamed by the industry to overinflate the reserve estimates. So the Energy Information Agency, 410 trillion. That was as of this year. Terry Engelder, who's like the fracking shill in chief, that was 392 trillion. And then, so basically, the socioeconomic study was based on, I guess, say 400 trillion cubic feet of gas, which is overstates it by like a factor of 5. Let's get to the end. Those are estimated recoverable reserves. Yeah. Now the other thing that Jannette pointed out is that they used an assumption of a 30-year well life for the wells. Well, the fact of the matter is there are no 30-year-old horizontally hydrofracking shale gas wells on the planet. So how the average is supposed to be 30 that's like Twilight Zone. That's a shale decline curve on a horizontally hydrofracking well, and it's from Chesapeake, my dear friends, and basically it shows that all the fun is over within 5 years. Like 80+% of it is gone within 2 years. So the notion that these wells are going to last 30 years is ridiculous. But it's the premise of the study. This is another thing that kind of baffles me is that in the Marcellus over here, the dry part of the Marcellus, which is the part that's adjacent to New York State, is uneconomic at current gas prices. Parts of the Marcellus that have liquids in them, propane, are still economic. But the Marcellus in this state would not, if you drilled a well in this state currently, it wouldn't be economic. So, what's the rush? Now, back to the protections. We've already gone over that, and I've mentioned that they borrow these numbers from Colorado and from Texas, these setbacks, where they're not appropriate. So what can you do, and what I would encourage you to do? Most of these some of these counties are already working on road use ordinances, which is a must. Obviously, some of them passed prohibition ordinances. We got until December 12th to respond to the SGEIS. So Bill Houston and I put together these sites that would hopefully help people facilitate responses to them. That's de-SGEIS responses and then fracking regulations, the two things that we're entitled to respond to. And we compressed it into that, quote, tiny URL. So this is how to do it. This is just a quick way to do an online response.
There's 20. You got 25 categories. 3 of them are kind of open-ended: number 1, 24, and 25. So you pick one, and you basically, what I'm suggesting you do, but don't tell the DEC, is you copy our response off of the website. You amend it so that it's not, you don't just clone it. You add your own insights and references to it, and you paste it into their online response protocol. You can upload up to 5 files on that, and you could crank out a dozen responses in an hour that way. And I would encourage you to do just that. Send as many responses as you can, and then by mail you can basically respond on anything. You're not limited to those 25 categories. So you go back, and we've dissected all 11 chapters of the SGEIS. You copy what we have online, you add something to it, you add some citations and references to it, you paste that onto a letter, you sign it, and you mail it to the DEC, and do as many of those as you can. And let me say, by the way, that we know that the SGEIS can be improved by responses, because the first draft of it, the setback from the lake was 50 feet, and so I think we can do better than that. And then the second draft, it was 150 feet. So, like that, again, that keeps the guy on the rig from falling into the lake. But now it's 2,000 feet. So, I mean, we know that somebody's responses have been read and have done some good. And I think there's room for improvement. So let's improve it. You take your responses, you distribute them like I do every 15 minutes. Thank you. And again, those are the websites we've used. The bottom one, Bill Houston did, 2011, SGEIS flaws. That's got everything in it. It has the videos, whatnot. The other 2 are ones that are specifically aimed at responding to the SGEIS itself and to the regulations. I mean, this is kind of the simple cut and paste way to do it. There's obviously more evolved ways to do it, but absent, anything else, I would recommend that you do this. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Chip. And Chip gets the award for having come the farthest, also having come from Cooperstown today. I've got a number of questions. If you still have questions, please pass them. Get your index card and pass them over to the volunteers. I just wanted to also mention another area that's sort of addressed. I would agree definitely that this draft is better than the first one. That's clear. Those 14,000 comments made a difference. So we need to up it to, say, 20,000 comments this time. It is going to be a little trickier, though, because the 3 counties in the sweet spot, Tioga, Broome, and Chemung, are also the 3 counties that got whacked by the floods, by Tropical Storm Lee. And you might remember that the final SGEIS was released the same day as the flood. I remember very, very concretely driving back from Binghamton as the rain was coming down, hearing that it had just been released. Well, they're paying attention to that, though, of course. So the State Department of Environmental Conservation is requesting funds from the feds, from FEMA. DC estimates it will need $2.5 million over the next 5 years to update decades-old federal flood maps, which don't include information from historic flooding that struck the southern tier in 2006 and again early last month. This is from the Binghamton Press Connects. DEC, of course, plans to prohibit drilling using hydraulic fracturing within 100-year floodplains, but those floodplains are based on the old maps. And until they're amended, those are the maps we have. Well, according to DEC, it'll take 5 years and $2.5 million to make those maps current. But I think they're going to be drilling before the maps are done. So that might be a relevant comment to make as well. So as Chip has said, pointed out, it really is important for people to comment. We have another venue for you to do that on December 1st. This is almost definite. Right, Don? The Tompkins County Council of Governments will be voting to approve this in a couple of weeks. I think it's going to go through. That we will have another public hearing set up by the Council of Governments on December 1st at the State Theater. We did this 2 years ago. So your comments will be, and this will just be to accept comments, 3-minute statements, and as well as written comments. We have been told that a representative from DEC will be there. We'll have a court stenographer to officially record your comments, and that will all be submitted as formal comments in the process. That'll be December 1st, so save the date and look for that.